Hey guys, so I really thought that I would be here today with a book review. Last week I decided not to review the arcs that I kind of had due in order to do my Read to Resist nonfiction recommendations, and I was like, okay, well, that's not great because at this point there's like 3 different arcs that I really should be looking at that are kind of like due to come out now or sooner. And I was like, okay, out of the 3 of them, there definitely is gonna be one that really speaks to me, and I'll just read that one and I'll review whichever one that is. Somehow, the answer is that none of the 3 of them were for me, and I'm a little frustrated by it. Now, as I've said in other videos leading up to this one, I have been having a really hard time reading lately. My brain is very stressed. I am currently about to start doing the data collection portion of my dissertation, and like the world is on fire. The sky is falling. So like as someone with high anxiety, there is a lot of things happening, plus like normal life, my job, you know, feeding myself, all those sort of things. So I want to just kind of preface this video with the fact that I am definitely hard to please right now as far as a romance novel goes, but also if I found something interesting in any of these books, I probably would have finished them, and I didn't. I DNF'd all 3 of them quite early on, and my proof for that is a couple of weeks ago I reviewed this really interesting Roman historical romance that was written really weird as far as I was concerned and wasn't totally clicking for me, but it was super different and interesting, and so I finished it anyway. So like, I like to believe that had these books caught me in any type of way, I would have finished them, but instead I am here to tell you about 3 romance novels I did not finish and why that is. If you have finished one of these novels and you think that I judge too quickly, please do down in the comments let me know. Maybe I will revisit them, but I have some feelings about some of these just not being for me. And I have got to tell you about it, I guess, because that's all the content we have today, folks. So let's get into it. So the first book that I tried to read was Never Planned on You by Lindsay Hammeroff. Now, the tagline on this is a glittering, laugh-out-loud, second-chance romance that reminds us true love is sometimes the one thing you never planned on. Which sounds really promising, right? Because I love second chance romances. So out of the 3, this is probably the one that I was most excited about in terms of like that type of plot, because I love, love, love a second chance romance. However, the second chance here is dubious at best. Allie met Graham on a drunken night in London, and they didn't even really have like a one-night stand. They drunkenly decided to get matching tattoos, even though they were total strangers, and then never saw each other again after that night. Allie is now back in the States, and she is interning as a wedding planner, and she has just been kind of given the contract for this huge wedding that could basically make or break her life. It could be enough money to completely change her life. It could give her a stable job. This wedding is everything for her professional and financial life, essentially. The twist is that the groom of this wedding is Graham, that guy that she drunkenly got matching tattoos with that one time. And it turns out that they still have the sparks flying and everything, but that's right, Graham is the groom of this wedding, where he is definitely not marrying Allie, okay? Right away, I got some weird feelings from this. First of all, it's not really second chance romance in the way that I understand it. Second chance romance is like people have had like a history and a relationship, at least one date, not whatever this was. I know that it says about the drunken tattoos in the book description, but I really thought that it was gonna be more than that, and it really wasn't. And then immediately I'm like, okay, these 2 were kind of like flirting, but it's weird because like A, Allie is at work and this job is really important, and B, Graham is the groom. he is getting married to someone else. So this is not a spoiler. This is something that is said in the blurb of the book. Graham's marriage is a marriage of convenience. So technically, he is not in love with the woman he is supposed to marry. I do not care. I do not care. The fact that Allie was willing to still engage in this flirtation, to kind of like potentially let this guy that she really has almost no history with potentially completely screw up this job that she really needs and this money that she really needs. Like the whole setup was not even shaky. It was uncomfortable because even if it's not technically cheating because Graham is not in love with his future soon-to-be wife, it really just had the same vibe to me as people who like know the situation is going on and are flirting and everything else still. And I just couldn't do it. Cheating and or cheating adjacent is one of those things in romance novels where it happens very rarely, I think, in like your, you know, regular romance novel off the street. But when it does come up like this, I don't like it. I don't want it. It does not make me like either of the characters in this situation because each of them has some kind of shady business going into it. And I just decided, you know what? This book is not for me. I don't want to finish it, and I will go on to try a different one of these books. So the second book that I picked up and tried to review for today was You Between the Lines by Katie Naiman. The tagline on this one is, a former sorority girl starts a prestigious poetry MFA program only to discover that one of her fellow grad students is her high school crush turned nemesis who can't stop writing about her. So in this one, we have Lee, who very much identifies with being a sorority girl, even though she does not seem to have sorority girl relationships. It's very weird, but whatever. She crushed on this guy named Will in high school. Now in college, although she did not know that he would be at this MFA program where he goes by William. William is her nemesis because in high school, Will gave her some pretty scathing criticism in like a peer review group, which even though like Lee is now into this master's program, she has never forgotten. And the like point of this is that there's a fellowship that is really prestigious that both of them want to get, and so they're kind of like fighting. So it's definitely like enemies to lovers situation. Lee really doesn't like William. And I had to skip forward a little bit to make sure this was the truth, but this is a single POV novel, at least as far as I could tell. And so one of the really frustrating bits in the beginning is Lee really doesn't like William, and I have nothing but her opinion to go on and the ways she sees him to go on, which is not great. Also, the plot started out really slow, and Lee just continuously harps on the fact that she doesn't feel like she belongs in this MFA program, and she's still like really upset by that criticism that Will gave her in high school. Now listen, I am someone who has been in school a really long time. Imposter syndrome is real. I'm in my PhD program, and I feel that regularly. So on the one hand, I totally, completely understand where Lee is coming from, this insecurity of not knowing if you're as good as the other people around you, etc., etc. However, the fact that she is still holding such a grudge about this one thing one other teenage person said to her in high school and continuously talking about it, kind of annoying, because you would have hoped that since high school, again, she's in an MFA program now, so she's been through a bachelor's and all that type of stuff. She has been able to either like learn from that criticism and move forward, or have learned through like talking to other teachers and other people, like, okay, that was like not good criticism, because again, creative people get criticism all the time, and some of that criticism is really helpful and useful, mean or not. Sometimes it's useful or not. And sometimes people just don't get what you're working on. I feel like especially in poetry, I don't write poetry because it is not how my brain works, but I feel like there are so many double meanings and possibilities in poetry specifically, and so many different ways to write poetry, that I feel like that's a place where it's pretty easy, if you get someone who doesn't vibe with your style, to get criticism that's not really helpful, especially in high school. Because this is a single POV novel, like I said, I just, in the beginning of this book, was not able to see Will as a person not defined by Lee. And like I said, Lee still really doesn't like him. And so between just like the repetitiveness of her chapters and like her complaints and her issues, and like the fact that I could not really see any of William's redeeming qualities, or if he even like was more than a two-dimensional character because of that lack of a POV, I was just like, no, I can't do this. And I was looking up reviews on Goodreads and Storygraph later, and it turns out there's also like a really heavy like death of parents thing that goes through this whole book. And I've done my time with sad romance novels. Michaela and I both actually talked about this. I have several reviews where I talk about this, and I was just like, this just kind of keeps getting worse for me. So again, I didn't get very far into this one either. Just DNF'd that and was like, all right, well, third time's a charm, right? This one's gotta be good, please. No. So the third book that I DNF'd this week is Book Boyfriend by Emily Wilberly and Austin Sigmund Broca. This is, to my understanding, a husband and wife who write books together. And in terms of DNFing this one, I was probably the most upset about this because I have read another one of their books. I read Do I Know You, which was a second chance romance between a couple that was married, who got married too young and they're growing apart. And they end up at like this retreat and they pretend not to know each other and like kind of rekindle their marriage and figure out what was wrong with it. And I really liked that one, and I did review it on the channel, so you can go watch that if you're interested. For Book Boyfriend, the tagline on this is "Devoted fangirl meets hesitant fanboy in this swoony contemporary love letter to readers who adore fantasy worlds." So the opening of this, we see Jennifer getting dumped. Jennifer knows that she's going to get dumped because she basically says that she's been in this relationship for a couple of weeks and it was never going anywhere from the first date, but she stayed in it because she has hope. And then this guy that she was dating shows up with a box of all of her belongings, proving her right, and essentially tells her, like, listen, you live in a fantasy world, like all those fantasy romances that you read. You want your partner to be one of those fantasy romance leads. I'm a real person. I'm not it. So I don't think either of us is getting what we want in this relationship, and I'm out. Directly after getting dumped, Jennifer turns around with her box of books. Kind of her pride is really smarting because you get from her that, you know, she didn't really enjoy being in that relationship either, but this guy's words have kind of landed for her. She turns around and literally runs into her work nemesis, Scott, who sees all of her stuff, sees that she's recently been dumped, makes some cracks about the romance novels that are in there, and, you know, Jennifer goes on her merry way. One thing to know about this book is that it feels like you need to read another book to understand this book. And this is the thing that I just could not get over. So what ends up happening is that with her time magically freed, Jennifer goes to a week-long immersive fan experience for this fantasy romance series that she really likes. It is extremely Sarah J. Maas adjacent. There are winged fairy like hunks, but also like vampires are involved, queens, kings, this whole situation. And from the first page, Jennifer is referencing plot points or characters that she wants to be like, or things that what she's currently going through are similar. Literally the first page of these characters that you have no idea who they are because this fantasy series is made up for this book. you will spend most of the book at that fantasy experience with people cosplaying as the characters or events that are taken straight from those books, and have no idea what's happening because they're not real, and you're dependent on Jennifer and like context clues to really understand what's going on. I have a Sarah J. Maas poster display right behind me. I love those books a lot. However, I found Jennifer's constant reference to wanting her life to be like them and to these characters and relationships and events that I had no idea what was happening while I'm trying to learn about Jennifer and Scott and this, romance novel to be incredibly grating. I just felt like I never had a firm footing because I was trying to learn the plot of a fantasy romance series while also trying to follow the plot of this romance novel, and it just really started to hurt my head, to be honest. Basically, once Jennifer gets there, she finds out that Scott is also at this immersive experience, so they are forced to spend time together doing like the different activities and stuff, and this is when, they start to really learn the truth about each other, yada, 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 or whatever. I was completely not clear on the personality shift in Scott. When you see him in that opening scene, he's very quiet and like not super rude, but kind of rude to Jennifer. And when he shows up at the fantasy experience, the blurb even says like he's got a total like personality transplant. He's confident, he's swaggering, and that does happen sometimes. That's why people love to cosplay. They feel more confident like when they're acting out the lives of these characters, and maybe we are sometimes in real life, and that's understandable. But it was just really weird because I hadn't seen, except for that one scene, Scott not at the fantasy experience, and I really didn't understand like their nemesis relationship other than the general like they just took a dislike to each other one day at work and then just like we're doing this the entire time. It's kind of discussed in like one paragraph at the beginning. So yeah, immediately to me it just felt like it lacked the emotional depth and storyline of Do I Know You, which is really what I went into this looking for, and that made me really, really sad because Do I Know You was so interesting to me. And then, like I said, really the thing that I just couldn't get over was these constant, like every other sentence or in every paragraph reference to this fantasy world that was completely new to me, and I didn't know what she was talking about. And I just found that it was like I couldn't focus. I couldn't focus on the actual point of the book while I was trying to remember the characters and events of this entire fake fantasy series. So DNF'd that as well. Again, DNFing all three of these books was not my goal in life. I was really hoping to finish them and give you guys full reviews. I am always hesitant to make reviews of books that I didn't finish because for all I know, maybe in the end they would have redeemed themselves. But each of these had something in the beginning where I just felt like if I kept going, I would be forcing myself to read a book that I would then just give a bad review to anyway. And with everything going on in the world, life is just too short to read books that you're not interested in. And maybe, like I said at the beginning, if I had entered like into these worlds with a different mindset, maybe I would have had a little bit more tolerance. But for me, these were all just like clicking in some way that either just like was a trope I didn't like, or I found something kind of frustrating in the writing. And I just decided that I would make an honest video about why I didn't finish them, so that I could at least talk about them. And if you're interested in them, again, at this point, Book Boyfriend will be out tomorrow, and Never Planned on You and You Between the Lines are already out, so you can make your own mind up. You can get them from your local library or your local bookstore, and then maybe come back and tell me if I missed out on something, or you think I should give one of them another chance because it does get better. But that's just not where I am right now as a reader. So these opinions are but my own, and I can only say what I feel as a single reader. You may very well feel differently, but that's the beauty of books, is that there's something out there for everyone, and not everyone likes the same thing. So thank you for listening to me rant, and I hope next week I actually have something read. Thanks, guys. Bye.